At a luxurious villa in Colombia, an international crime boss was enjoying a lavish life. The entire villa was protected extremely strictly by a team of armed bodyguards. He had a habit of swimming every morning. In the middle of the pool, he suddenly saw his expensive watch fall to the bottom of the swimming pool. He dived down to retrieve it. Just as his hand was about to touch it, a black arm suddenly pulled him down, drowning him. The boss couldn't breathe, struggled, and looked up hoping the bodyguard would notice, but it was too late. The mysterious man in black refused to let go of his neck. A few minutes later, his body floated to the surface. To conceal it, the man in black held his arm, making the body pretend to keep swimming. Distracting the bodyguards, he ran down to the basement and took off his tight swimsuit, revealing bulging muscles. He was the organization's #1 assassin. Arthur had never failed an assassination. What made him the best was his perfect murder plan. No gunshots, no traces left behind. He was a master of staging the scene. Arthur ignored the servants and bodyguards upstairs shouting when they saw their boss's body. They only thought the boss unfortunately had a drowning accident, not that he was murdered by an assassin. Taking advantage of the lax security, he changed into a chef's outfit and blended in with the servants. He leisurely escaped, quickly ran to his car, packed his gear, and headed towards a bridge. He raised his hand to look at his watch, carefully calculating the time the ferry would reach the bridge's underside. Adjusting his coordinates, he jumped down and clung to the tail of the small boat. Utilizing the engine's pull, Arthur easily swam without losing strength. Completing the mission only took 24 hours. He quickly drove back to the boathouse and into his isolated house. He gave the guard a bottle of fine wine as overtime pay. He expertly took a speedboat and sped away. His secret base was far from the mainland to keep his identity and missions absolutely secret. After the stressful assassination period, he put on some music to relax his mind. Next, he went to take down the information and photo of the boss and destroy them. Before acting, he spent a whole month researching his target. The Mexican boss was a notorious smuggler. Everyone around the area hated this man. He arrogantly let his henchmen beat up passers-by just because their cars blocked his way. Arthur's motto was simple. He believed pulling the trigger was easy, but the difficult part was completing the mission without anyone knowing of his existence. He ate while reading online news mentioning the boss's drowning death while swimming at his private residence. He was satisfied and went to collect his payment. After each job, he earned $1 to $2 million, enough to live lavishly for a lifetime without worries. He arranged to meet the middleman for the money at an American-style breakfast diner. The person who arrived was a silver-haired old man. He was in a wheelchair, but still looked very tough. He was Harry, Arthur's longtime friend and associate. His job was to be the middleman for the organization to pay the fee, so Arthur highly respected and cherished him. Knowing his peak abilities, old Harry wanted to ask for his son Steve to be trained by him. Because according to him, Steve was useless, a slacker. The money he earned wasn't even enough to live on, and endless debts caused him great hardship shouldering the burden. Hearing that, he immediately accepted because of the long-standing relationship between him and Harry. After receiving the reward, Arthur happily took the money and went carousing at a bar. Although a cold-blooded assassin, what man doesn't like pretty young girls? Immediately, his eyes fell on a stylish girl. So they went home to do what everyone knows, right? After the deed was done, he left a wad of cash and left. Back home, Arthur opened his computer to receive his next mission. What stunned him? This time the organization assigned him the mission to assassinate a target who was none other than Harry, his close friend. He thought the manager made a mistake, so he called to question it. But the person on the other end of the line firmly confirmed the one they wanted to eliminate was indeed him. Refusing to give up, Arthur requested a meeting with the senior manager to ask for the clear reason. He boarded a private plane sent by Dean to a secret address. Upon landing, he was met by Dean's bodyguard. Despite his appearance, the bodyguard was a world boxing champion, yet still agreed to work as a guard for Dean, showing how powerful he was. In the car, Dean was talking on the phone with his son. Whatever killing work they did outside, people like him also wished for a proper family. He explained to Arthur that 6 months ago, the organization sent 5 operatives to South Africa to deal with a drug lord. But all 5 died strangely. No information was sent back to the organization. And only the senior director and Harry knew about this deal. Investigating, the director noticed unusual transactions in Harry's bank account. Around $20 million were transferred in, suspicious. Considering his financial situation, he only had enough to get by. Furthermore, he was also bearing debts for his son. So where did the money come from? The suspicion arose. What if Harry had betrayed the organization and informed the boss to share the money? They would rather kill the wrong person than miss one. Arthur himself would have to personally execute his friend. The close relationship between the two would make this easier. Leaving no traces would be even safer for the organization. Arthur only had 48 hours to complete the mission, otherwise the organization would also hunt him down. Arthur faced inner turmoil, having to personally kill Harry. On the other hand, while working, he received a phone call. The person on the other end was Arthur. He warned Harry to leave the building immediately because the organization believed he had sold them out and was sending someone to kill him. Harry gathered important things, not forgetting to bring his self-defense gun. Following Arthur's instructions, he took the elevator route that short-circuited the entire 18th floor electrical system, disabling security cameras. He quickly headed towards the emergency elevator following his instructions. Down the elevator, he snuck through a secret passage connected to the adjacent building. When Harry escaped to the parking lot, he was completely relieved to see Arthur standing there. But looking back at the completely wrecked car, Harry finally understood his intention. He admitted to selling out the organization and praised him for arranging things so well. The security cameras didn't record anything, and maybe he would stage a robbery murder? Then, he drew a silver gun from his person, but not to shoot him back. On the contrary, Harry even helped add a few bullets to make the scene of fighting off robbers look more real. He gave him the gun. He took the gun from his friend's hand and aimed it directly at his chest. The assassin's profession did not allow him to shed tears. After the funeral, he came to Harry's grave to visit his old friend and met Steve, Harry's spoiled son. After his father's death, Steve became calmer and more obedient. He came to greet Arthur, and the two got into the car to go to the house Harry used to live in. Steve complained to Arthur that perhaps the old man hated him very much, but Arthur said that he loved him dearly, often recounting the time when Steve was a child. But he only gave a bitter laugh and said, "If he loved me, why didn't he ever call?" When the two entered the house, Arthur offered to help him financially, but Steve refused. He intended to sell his car to get enough money to buy more guns to take revenge for Harry. Despite looking like a drifter, he deeply mourned his father, wondering what son of a bitch would shoot an old man in a wheelchair. He swore he would take revenge on them, but Arthur advised caution, and then he left. As Steve was sitting in his car waiting for a friend, a black youth approached him. Suddenly, the black guy pointed a gun and demanded Steve get out of the car. It turned out this guy was a carjacker. Bitter about his father's death, thinking this guy was connected to that crowd, he grabbed his arm and slammed the black guy hard against the car, causing him pain, not forgetting to add kicks to his stomach and face. He drew a gun intending to shoot this guy, but Arthur arrived just in time to stop him, then pulled Steve into the car. He threatened the black guy not to reveal what happened tonight, or he would die. As for Steve, calming down, he finally drove away in fear. The next day, he came to meet him asking to apprentice as an assassin, coincidentally meeting Arthur walking on the street. He refused his offer, but the guy said that the old man had helped him so much before, yet now that he was in difficulty, he wouldn't help back, truly ungrateful. Arthur didn't care much. He got into the car and left. But looking back at the photo of his deceased friend and wanting to atone, he contacted Steve again to guide him to become an assassin like himself. Exactly at 7 a.m. as agreed, Steve came to meet him at a pet store. He explained to him why this profession was called mechanic, simply because they specialize in solving problems, working on contract for money. Steve pretended to know everything about this job, thinking it was as easy as pie for him. But Arthur said, "You don't know a damn thing." These words made Steve angry. He challenged him back that Arthur didn't know anything about him either. To Steve's surprise, he rattled off a stream of information about Steve from birth to adulthood, where he was born, how old his mother was when she died. All were clear in his mind. Even Steve's criminal record from high school was dug up by him. This made the guy completely impressed and submissive. The reason Arthur wanted Steve to adopt a dog was because he wanted to train him in the ability to blend in and not act on emotion like the day before. Steve had to learn how to build an external facade of a kind young man, frequently walking his dog, and whose only hobby was solving Sudoku puzzles at a coffee shop, so that no one would suspect a gentle young man of being involved in killing. After developing that habit, Arthur began teaching him shooting skills. Steve's skills increasingly improved. At first, he only shot through tree trunks, but now this guy could shoot a shot that shattered a concrete slab. After that, he was required to master medical knowledge to fool life insurance companies. Only when the target he killed was considered an accident by the insurance companies would he reach the basic requirement to practice the profession. After Harry's house and car were confiscated by the bank, Steve stayed with Arthur for a while. Gradually, Steve's shooting ability became pinpoint accurate. Now it was time for Arthur to raise the difficulty of the game. He took him along to do a mission. The two arrived at an old apartment building. This was a guy specializing in arms smuggling. Inside, Arthur pretended to be a client needing weapons, demanding the dealer deliver within 1 day. He agreed and demanded payment up front. Taking advantage of the guy counting the money, he suddenly slipped a rope around his neck and strangled him until he stopped breathing. Next was the segment about staging the fake crime scene. He turned on a segment of pornographic film and placed a pillow opposite the armed smuggler's body. The cause of death this time was death due to hypersexuality. Facing Steve's puzzled look, but he still said nothing. Arthur took him into a room plastered with photos and information about the guy who had just been dealt with. Actually, this guy specialized not only in weapons, but also in drugs. He shot police, engaged in lewd acts, did all sorts of things, but still lived freely, and finally the organization also requested him to handle it. Now it was Steve's turn. He was assigned his first mission, the big guy he often met at the coffee shop. According to his master, Steve learned that he was also a mechanic assassin from another organization. His schedule was to be at the coffee shop every morning from 9 to 10 a.m. This guy was almost impossible to touch. However, he had two weaknesses: Chihuahua dogs and young guys. Despite looking big, this guy really loved dogs, and he also wanted to find some fresh young meat as partners. Steve also had to admire Arthur's meticulous calculations. He even knew the guy's catchphrase and outlined detailed answers for Steve to easily gain his favor. Indeed, this guy fell into the trap. He invited the young man Steve to go for a few drinks. Steve agreed. He went back to meet him to prepare the tools. Here, he prepared a special heart-stopping drug. Just 6 drops were enough to handle an adult. Steve's eyes were full of admiration as he looked at him. That evening, in the crowded bar, Steve used his skills to make the fat guy laugh his eyes shut. Waiting for the moment the guy stood up, he quickly dripped the special solution into his wine glass according to Arthur's instructions. But in the end, he didn't poison him. What he wanted was the feeling of strangling or killing the opponent with his own hands. Steve deliberately left first, using the tactic soft ties tight. The big guy immediately ran after him to find him. He invited him back to his place. And guess what? Steve once again disobeyed Arthur. He said absolutely not to fight hand-to-hand with that big fat guy because he was 2 heads taller than him, but he completely ignored it. When the other guy took Steve to his private home and propositioned him, he started unbuttoning Steve's shirt one by one. Steve wasn't having none of it either. He also played along by unbuckling the guy's belt in front of him, making him smile with delight. Taking advantage of the moment he turned away, Steve grabbed the belt and tightened it around his neck. However, the difference in physique caused this guy to reach his arms back, grab his shirt, and slam him to the ground. Steve slammed a chair into the big fat guy's face, but it had no effect. Steve was lifted up by him and slammed against the wall. Then, the guy dragged Steve into the kitchen and threw him around like a frog. Taking advantage of the guy's oversight, Steve used a screwdriver to stab him in the stomach but couldn't stop his attacks. After a while of trying, he finally made him fall down and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest. Blood soaked this guy's shirt. Steve returned to Arthur's house in a battered state, leaving him very frustrated because this punk acted on his own. He was told to handle it cleanly but didn't listen. Now he'll feel the pain and learn his lesson, consider it gained experience. True to tradition, he took him carousing in a bar every time a mission was completed. Here, Arthur met the pretty girl from the other day again, so he followed her. Steve was no less. He also spotted a curvy girl. After saying goodbye to his lover, Arthur went to the airport to pick up a package. He carefully opened the box. It was the payment the organization paid him after he completed the assassination. At this time, Dean called. He questioned him why he assigned the mission to someone else and that it wasn't according to the agreement. He firmly stated that he only had an agreement with Harry, not the organization. Except for matters of money. Dean learned that the person he was training was none other than Harry's son. He warned Arthur to be careful not to carry a snake that bites the home chicken. Then, Dean assigned him a new mission. This transaction was very large, so the client requested it be carried out immediately, as soon as possible. He looked at the target's file and replied that he would consider it before accepting. Back home, he analyzed the target's file and pinned it onto a board. Through the video clip, his name was Andrew, 45 years old, self-proclaimed savior. He had raked in millions of dollars from churches and fanatical followers. Steve and Arthur discussed a plan to eliminate him quickly and efficiently. They flew to Chicago, the city where Andrew and his cult were operating. They observed this guy from a distance. It was obvious he was a fraud and was suspected of killing a nun in the cult. 2 weeks earlier, she was seen going with Andrew and then disappeared. Police only found the body 2 weeks ago. Worse was that she had previously said she was pregnant with Andrew's child. That guy had spent $22 million to silence her. As the two were discussing the story, Andrew walked into the room looking very tired, but when someone arrived, he immediately sat up straight, putting on a dignified appearance. Many people were deluded into thinking this guy was the reincarnation of God. They asked for autographs hoping to be blessed, especially this beautiful young disciple. Looking at her, it was obvious she was infatuated with this fraudulent father. They climbed up to the penthouse floor where he lived and installed a series of surveillance cameras. The two expertly climbed to the highest floor and infiltrated inside via the plumbing system. Arthur used his skills to dig a small hole and insert a mini camera to see Andrew's location. They patiently waited for this fat guy to return. Today, he had a private appointment with Frank. This guy was his personal doctor, whose job was to take care of Andrew's health. Through the camera, Steve saw that the liquid Frank injected into Andrew was actually ketamine, a type of anesthetic drug. The problem was that upon encountering adrenaline, ketamine would counteract this drug, causing their plan not to proceed as initially intended. When Steve thought Arthur was telling him to retreat, he reminded the guy to put on gloves. The two walked out and stood in front of Andrew. Taking advantage of the doctor stepping out to take a call, only this fat guy was left in the room at this moment. He was also high on drugs, so he had no ability to resist. Arthur held the fat guy's head, while Steve inserted an endoscope, suffocating him to death. A few seconds after he died, the doctor came back in, saw Andrew dead, and panicked, going insane. If the story of this savior dying was leaked, these guys would lose billions of dollars. While hiding inside the wall, Steve accidentally caused a screw to fall down. It rolled out. Frank ordered his subordinate to check, and he was shot dead by Steve drawing his gun. Seeing that, the henchmen also shot back in resistance. One group chased after the two, another group ran downstairs to block their escape route. Arthur grabbed a bodyguard's gun and threw him against the wall. He broke the glass and ran out onto the rooftop to escape. Steve wasn't doing much better. He was resisting the group of bodyguards with all his might. He was both escaping and looking for Arthur's position. At this moment, he was snatching a gun from another guy, but unfortunately took a kick from him, which almost sent his body falling off the building. But luckily, he turned the tables and threw him down from a height of several hundred meters. Just then Steve found him. Both put on safety ropes and rappelled down. Unfortunately, the rope wasn't long enough. The two were stopped in midair. A bodyguard from above shot at them, but fortunately, they managed to temporarily take refuge in an apartment. Arthur and Steve disguised themselves as a group of guests leaving the building. He didn't forget to tell Steve to falsify information. Then the two separated and went their own ways to avoid being exposed. At the airport, while waiting for Steve to arrive, Arthur met the assassin from the same organization again. It was Sebastian. Remarkably, this guy was presumed dead in South Africa from the incident where Harry sold out the organization, according to what Dean said. To investigate the matter, he secretly followed the guy onto a bus. He didn't beat around the bush and asked, "What reason makes you still alive? The last time I saw you, I saw a bullet wound on your head." He continued to ask, "What about the South Africa incident?" He answered nonchalantly that Dean himself had paid him a huge sum to kill the remaining 4 guys, then fake his death and disappear. It was Dean who was the one who sold out the organization and was discovered by Harry. He intended to expose Dean to the boss, so this entire play was orchestrated by him to frame Harry, in the name of the organization forcing Arthur to kill his friend. Sebastian taunted that he had been painfully tricked, which was why he was so angry. Suddenly, he drew a knife and lunged towards Arthur. Both were professional assassins, so the fight was fierce. He was being choked from behind by him when he took a fire extinguisher pin and stabbed him in the face. Instead of killing him, he threw the guy out onto the street. Just then, a car sped towards him and hit him, killing the guy. Next, he went to find Dean to take revenge for Harry. But before that, he called Steve, learning that he was being held captive by a group of the organization's assassins. Arthur quietly said that there was a gun under the sofa. After hanging up the phone, Steve reached his arm out to grab the gun, attacked the 3 guys and escaped. The two quickly packed their belongings. While retrieving a box of gear in the warehouse, Steve discovered Harry's silver gun among Arthur's equipment. Now, he knew that Arthur was the one who had killed his father. However, he said nothing, simply took the gun and followed Arthur's instructions. On the way, Steve asked him if he ever thought about the people he had killed. He was surprised to be asked so suddenly, but replied that he never had. Steve continued to ask if he had ever killed someone he knew. Arthur also didn't hesitate to answer, yes. When Steve asked if he felt anything different, his eyes were now filled with tears. He replied that at the moment of doing it, no, but afterwards, yes. He did all of this purely for the job, without any personal favor, without any regret or pity. Steve said that anyway, it didn't matter, the target just needed to die and the matter was over. He couldn't reply to that statement. The two went to Finch's house, Dean's subordinate. Steve immediately gave him a shot to the leg as a warning. Arthur didn't even hesitate to drag out the guy's daughter to threaten him. All he needed was Dean's information. Despite his child being used as a threat, Finch did not utter a single word. He dragged the girl to a grinder and issued a final ultimatum. If Finch didn't answer, he would shred the girl's hand. Even at that point, not until blood and flesh flew everywhere, did Finch agree to answer his question. Fortunately, deep down he was still human. He didn't want an innocent person to be harmed because of his work. He used a piece of beef to pretend, in order to force Finch to spill the information he needed. Arthur called Dean to ask about Harry's price. Dean replied it was $50 million, and also offered a sum of $10 million for him to let the matter go. He didn't care at all. Dean said that Harry's death was simply business. Now, he simply put a price so high that every assassin would want to hunt Arthur. But he was one step ahead. He pretended he was inside the building to lure Dean out of his fortress. Both prepared all necessary weapons and began carrying out the plan. He stole a car and tracked Dean through a video camera placed in front of a building. At the same time, Steve, holding a gun, hijacked a bus. As soon as he saw Dean's escort convoy, he floored the gas pedal, rushing out at full speed, crashing straight into the last car. The shootout took place in a flash. Arthur, after shooting down a few guys, climbed onto a garbage truck and chased after Dean's car. They were cut off by Steve at a small alley. The lead car immediately crashed and exploded. Seeing that, Dean immediately told the driver to turn back and escape, but Arthur, driving the hulking garbage truck from behind, advanced, crashing straight into Dean's car. The ill-fated car was lifted up like a sheet of paper, killing everything inside, except for Dean. That guy was severely injured, crawling out. The two were waiting and emptied their magazines into the enemy, then coldly walked away. Arthur's next plan was for both of them to disappear together, changing their names. Steve asked if they would go together. He replied that it was up to him. Steve, while reaching back to get water, revealed his father's gun. Arthur knew that he had learned the truth. He quietly listened to Steve talking, without saying a single word. Both stopped at a gas station to refuel. Steve stepped outside to pump gas, then went inside to buy something. Before leaving, he even said sorry for what had happened, but Steve said, "I don't give a damn anymore." Steve pretended to turn back and check the gas nozzle. He secretly pulled it out, let the gasoline flow out, then walked away, leaving Arthur still sitting in the car, his face calm. Steve walked behind a wall, drew his gun, and shot straight towards the car, causing it to explode, burning everything inside. He visited Arthur's house again, unsure what to do next. He opened his old master's favorite music player. Then, he walked out to the garage, started his car, and drove away. After driving for a while, Steve noticed a piece of paper on the passenger seat next to him. On it was Arthur's message. "If you're reading this, I'm fucking dead." Steve smiled one last time before the car exploded. Inside the house, when the music ended, a wire was pulled, activating a switch, detonating a bomb that burned down the entire house. Going back to the past, at the scene of the gas station explosion, investigators, after reviewing the video footage, saw that the victim had slipped out of the car just before it exploded. Our assassin, somehow, still survived and killed all those who wanted to harm him.